Back to My Garden, episode 90.
Welcome to Back to My Garden. Discover your passion for gardening. Here's Dave Ledoux.
Attention, garden lovers. Do you want to save time, save money, and have your most amazing garden ever? Receive free tips, strategies, and gardening techniques from passionate gardeners around the world. Join the VIP club for free today at www.backtomygarden.com/VIP. Are you concerned about toxic chemicals, GMOs, and frankenfood? Don't panic. Grow organic. Discover our new resource for organic gardening. Go to www.backtomygarden.com/myorganic. Well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world when you listen to this. I'm Dave Ledoux, and welcome to another episode of Back to My Garden. And we're going to my neck of the woods today, folks. Our guest, Andrea, she's from Michigan, just over the border from us. Andrea enjoys all 4 seasons of gardening in Brighton, Michigan. She blogs about cooking, food preservation, sustainability, and Michigan garden history. We have a lot to talk about. I want to welcome to the show Andrea Hughes. Hi, Andrea.
Hi, Dave.
Welcome to Back to My Garden.
Well, thank you very much.
We're practically so close on the map, you could hear me yelling if I just spoke really loudly. We're just across the border from each other.
Yeah, I think I can hear you echoing across the lake.
We have listeners now in something like 64 countries. So if they don't know where Brighton, Michigan is, look at a map of North America and there's a cluster of lakes. They're called the Great Lakes. And Andrea's less than an hour from Ann Arbor. Andrea, sit back and relax. I want you to take a minute or two, share with us a little bit about your background and how did you get into gardening?
Okay, well, I've gardened since I was a little kid with my parents. I guess it did start with my parents. My mother basically did the vegetable and flower gardens around our house, and we lived in the boonies in the woods, so there was always work hauling mulch, hauling rocks, hauling brush from trees that fell down, cutting trees down. So my parents and I would work together doing that through my childhood and into my teen years. My dad was a doctor. He liked to take us on excursions, different places on his time off, like to nature centers and parks and things like that. And he'd always tell us about the wildflowers and trees and quiz us on the names of things. So I learned a lot from him. My parents also liked to go out in the woods in the backyard, take up wildflowers, not the endangered ones, of course, but some of the prettier, more common ones, and move them back into the garden. And I think the first garden I ever had was as a little kid, probably about 6 years old. And my folks took us to Meadowbrook Hall in Rochester, Michigan, which was the state of one of the Dodges and her husband, who had been some lumber baron. So they had a really big house, and it's one of those houses that gets made over into a museum with the gardens and everything. And we toured it, and in the back they had a smaller miniature house set up for their daughter. And I, being 6 years old, fell in love with it because everything was mini. They had everything: the kitchen, the bathroom, the bedroom, and places for the little girl's dolls, and the girl even had a little garden. So my parents, wanting to spoil their 6-year-old princess at the time, had a shed in our backyard. And my dad painted the inside pink, and we put my play furniture in there. It wasn't nearly as fancy as the Dodge Estate one, of course. It was just a one-room shed. But all my play furniture went in there, and because the little girl had a garden, of course I had to have one too. So we set up a little square of bricks next to the front door of the shed, and in the fall I planted tulip bulbs. And they did come up the next year, and they actually did better than my mother's, funnily enough. My mom's tulips, the deer always used to eat them, or the chipmunks. Mine came up for about 5 years running before they died. So that was probably my first garden. When I got to be an adult, I went to college and really didn't garden much then, except for a houseplant that I still have, my aloe, that I named Audrey after Little Shop of Horrors. because it's so huge now. And that's traveled with me to several places. But after college, I joined the Peace Corps from 2002 to 2004. And I was stationed in Malawi, Africa. And there I learned about permaculture from a former Peace Corps volunteer named Stacia and her husband. They taught us about growing guilds of plants together and how you could take a fallow land that had just been beaten down and just stamped mud and build it back into like a forest garden. And I never quite got to that point because I was only there 2 years, but in the back of my house in Malawi, I started building a garden. I put up a fence made out of reeds and posts, and my neighbors helped me build that. And I planted papayas, and one of my friends gave me a banana tree that only started to make bananas when I left. And I planted some vegetables like eggplant and tomatoes and things like that. And the little kids used to come over and help me water. And they'd play in the mud. They were really cute. And I had a couple disasters there. One time I had goats get in, and they started eating everything, but fortunately the children caught them and chased them back out again. And then another time it was dry season, and my garden was the only spot of green because I was able to haul water to it. But because everything else was brown, the grasshoppers discovered my garden and pretty much chomped the heck out of everything in the span of time. I was a school teacher in the Peace Corps, so I had gone to teach classes, and by the time I got home from classes about 2 or 3 in the afternoon, everything was eaten down to nubs by these grasshoppers. So I had a locust plague.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. But my neighbors helped me with that too. Apparently grasshoppers in Africa are edible. So you eat them before they eat you. You collect them up and you roast them. That's how you take care of that problem. And most of the plants in Africa grow back somehow. Not the tomatoes; those were goners, but the papayas and things, they got eaten down to nubs and grew back again anyway, which I thought was pretty impressive. After that, I traveled around a bit, going to college, and I got a master's degree and a nursing degree. And then I moved back to Michigan. I got married. We had our first house, and I built a garden there. And we've recently moved to my current house that I'm blogging about here on the lake. And there are already gardens somewhat established, but I want to, I guess, color them in, so to speak. There's things like hedges and little trees and bushes and some daylilies, but not a whole lot else. So my plan is next summer to, along the edge of the lake, there's a garden bed where I want to put in a mix of herb garden and perennial vegetables, mostly. So.
Wow. Okay, listeners, make sure now if you're driving, don't take notes. I'll have Andrea's blog link up at BackToMyGarden. Her blog is at www.milakehomegarden.blogspot.com. So the MI stands for Michigan, Lake Home Garden. You can follow Andrea on Twitter at ALHRAMANDREA. I'll have a link to that as well. Wow, you gave us a huge foundation to talk about a dozen different things, Andrea. You've had a colorful gardening career.
I guess, yes.
Tell me about your aloe plant. It must live indoors like a roommate, right? It never goes outside?
It does. It was just an aloe plant I picked up at a grocery store. And, you know, you don't have to water aloe plants very much, and they're very tough plants. So you just give it a little bit of water once a week, and it'll just keep growing. And it would outgrow its pot, so I'd upsize the pot every once in a while. And it became really huge at one point, and I realized it was making little offshoot babies, basically. And altogether, it's made 8 pups, I guess, is what you'd call them. And I've separated them and passed them out to my neighbors. But
and you bring it. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say it's probably about 3 feet across and 3 feet tall.
You carry this thing outside in the spring.
Mm-hmm.
He grows all spring. It's a girl, right? Audrey?
I call it Audrey. I don't know. Well,
Perfect.
it makes babies, so it's a girl, right?
Here's my question. You bring it in the fall.
Mm-hmm.
I do the same thing, but I have bugs. Do you have a tip on it? Do you like spray it down or any thought, or do you just put it in the garage?
I've never had an insect problem with the aloe. I've had insect problems with other houseplants. I've had aphids and things on other things, but for some reason the aloe has never been attacked.
Okay. I'm kind of dumb as a stump. Like I brought it in, looked at it, looked fine, but then when they got warm, they started to hatch. And I had a swarm of aphids in my basement on my pool table, so I was just curious how you plan for the bugs.
I've had aphids on some of the other plants. I even lost a plant. What was it I was growing? Can't remember now, but something got destroyed by aphids. But usually what I do is I bring the plants in gradually in the fall so I don't shock them. And I try to spray them down with water. That usually deters aphids because the house gets really dry and the aphids are attracted to drier conditions. So if you miss the plants, that usually deters them. I have had to use bug spray on them. I try to get organic at the local garden center, spray if I can. But that's about it. Usually just rinsing the plant down prevents them.
You and I share a similar winter. It's the middle of winter now, and for our friends in warm climates, minus 20 is not unusual this time of year.
That's correct.
Are you gardening at all, or are you just kind of dreaming about it and reading gardening magazine and seed catalogs?
Mostly dreaming about it and the house plants. I also like to look around in the winter because, the leaves are off the trees and things, so you can see where insects have made a nest, like tent worms, for example, the past year, or where there's old bird nests, or where a limb is dead. And about the only thing I'll do in winter outside for the plants is sometimes trim things. Like if I see a dead branch and I can get at it easily because there's no leaves in the way, and all the other plants, the perennials are, asleep underground basically, I can walk over and get the branch and chop it down. And around March or so, if there's any dead brown perennials still sticking up, I'll trim those down to about an inch tall just to clean things up so the new growth can come in.
Can I share some hope with you that spring is coming?
Yes.
I have a little light set up on an old pool table in the basement. This is my growing lights, me and my wife. And we have a tomato called a micro tom. Have you ever heard of a micro tom?
Nope.
It's the size of your hand. Like it's maybe 3 weeks old now, and it's got to be 5 weeks old, and it's fully grown. The height of your hand. Mm-hmm. And it has fruit on it. And it's filled with the yellow flowers. Wow. And the fruit is going to grow about the size of a cherry, I think. Like a sweet 100. Mm-hmm. But these are the smallest tomatoes apparently you can buy. And so if they grow and they actually taste like something, I'm going to put the photos up.
They sound excellent.
Just to go and see a tomato growing in the middle of January, it brings a smile to your face. Spring is 90 days away.
It does, yep. Mm-hmm.
I thought when you mentioned your miniature garden, this would be just perfect for it, a 6-inch tall tomato.
Yep. It would be. It's about the right size.
The listeners want to know about your garden last year. We just had kind of an unusual 2014 summer. What was it like for you and your garden in 2014?
I think probably similar to you, it was damp and not that hot of a summer. There were a few hot days, but it was damp and cooler, I guess. I had just moved to this house last summer, so I didn't do a whole lot of gardening beyond weeding. I did put in a couple of pear trees, and my Liberty apple, which if anyone's seen the blog, got run over this winter. We're at the base of a hill, and it gets icy in the winter, and somebody slid off the road, drove partway through the neighbor's yard, came through our yard, and fortunately missed the electrical pole and the mailbox, but split the difference between the two and mowed over my brand new Liberty apple tree that I planted last spring and just took it out entirely. I don't even think I can graft it. It's detached.
Oh, boy. Oh, sorry to hear that.
I know. But
you have to
replace it next year.
The story you just told, Andrea, because listeners in Australia can't even relate to this, but that's the nature of living in 4 seasons, icy roads, and someone drives through your front yard by accident.
That's true. The closest analogy I can make is if you got a really wet season and had a lot of mud on a road, sometimes the mud can get slippery on a downhill incline, but ice is really hard to drive on. Snow you can drive on because there's traction, but the ice, you'll lose control of your car, even at a low speed sometimes. So
I'm impressed that
I'm not really mad at the neighbor. I'm just glad they didn't hurt themselves. But at the same time, my poor tree.
Do you have plans to grow a new one, or are you going to make some changes?
I think I may not actually put the tree in the same spot. I think I'll get another Liberty apple because I love them and because they're disease resistant and they're very prolific. But I think I'll put it maybe in the backyard somewhere. So because if that spot is prone to getting hit by cars, and maybe I'll put perennials in there, something that's, at least if the ground is frozen, the perennials aren't likely to get damaged if the car rolls over them because the roots are underground and safe.
Right.
So I'll try to get a nice tall perennial of some sort there, maybe some sunchokes or a grass or something.
I'm taking notes. If you hear scratching noises, I'm going to put all these links up on the blog. I'm going to put a link to sunchokes and a link to Liberty apple. I guess you bought it as a tree from a local nursery, or how did you find yours?
Yeah, I found it at the local nursery. There's English Gardens and Bourdain's out here. And the one I got it was at Bourdain's nursery. They have grafted dwarf fruit trees, which are nice if you're a homeowner with a smaller lot like I have, because then you don't have to worry about the tree growing into electrical lines or anything. They only maybe get 15 feet tall and with an equal spread. So much easier to pick the apples or fruit for one thing, and then for another, it doesn't take up a whole lot of room.
I have you here, so I have to ask you about the food preserving side of your blog. This was my first year when I was actively involved in canning at our house. And oh my goodness, it's a lot of work, but it's really tasty and rewarding. What do you do for food preserving? Where did you start, and what's your favorites?
Well, where I learned how is from my mother again. She'd mostly canned tomatoes and some fruit. But I do the same. I'll can tomatoes. I should back up a little bit. There's 2 ways to can things. One's with a water bath, and if you do it that way, whatever you can has to be acidic enough that you don't get botulism bacteria in your food, basically. So you can things like pickle vegetables or tomatoes that have high acid, maybe throw in a little bit of lemon juice to make it more acidic so it's safer. So things like that I will can with a water bath. And then about a year ago I got a pressure canner, which it's kind of like don't confuse it with a pressure cooker if anyone wants to do this. It's a little bit different, and a pressure cooker, if you try to can in that, might explode. So please don't get a pressure cooker. Get a pressure canner. They sell them on Amazon. And with that, you can can anything. You can can meat, soup, spaghetti sauce, doesn't matter how acidic it is. It does kind of make the food mushy, so you kind of want to stick with mushier things to begin with when you can that way. But I've done spaghetti sauce that way so far, and some soup.
I understand. I'm a big fan of the like a turkey soup or a stew. But we don't have the pressure canner. I said to my wife, "Hey, when are we going to make that stuff?" And she says, "That you're not ready for that. You stick with peeling apples." And we did like 40 pounds of apples, and I think we did 110 jars or 115 jars of food.
Have you ever tried apple butter?
I have. I grew up on apple butter. I grew up in central Canada, and apple butter was a staple. And all kinds of marmalades and mint jelly and choke cherry jams. And I kind of had a similar upbringing as you.
Yeah. There are a couple of good websites, too, for canning. There's a gal who does a blog called the Local Kitchen Blog, and I guess she's in upstate New York somewhere. I don't know her personally, but every recipe of hers I've tried is dead on. It works perfect. And then there's a Ball canning jar site that has good recipes for canning different things, too.
It's something I would have never tried on my own, but my wife loved it and just jumped right into it. I think a lot of our listeners are probably, afraid or nervous about getting started, but Ball is kind of the place to go if you're a brand new beginner, right?
Yep, that's where I'd go. Mm-hmm. And canning tomatoes is pretty simple, and the same with fruit. There's no cooking involved, or even pickles. It's just heating things to boiling and then putting the lid on quick enough, I guess. Yeah. So if you can boil water, you can can.
If you're completely nervous, take a course. There's lots of courses, or find a coach or a teacher. And I tell people you can find somebody to teach you canning and just do it over Skype. I know a guy who teaches Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu over Skype, so canning can be taught over Skype. There you go, Andrea. There's a good part-time business as a canning coach.
It sounds like it. Can you really learn jiu-jitsu over Skype, though?
Well, if you live in a small town, what are you going to do? You could watch YouTube videos, but that's like trying to learn to swim off of watching a video. So this guy has the kids put the mats down in his garage, invite over 2 or 3 buddies, and he coaches them.
Wow.
That's the wonderful thing about technology is even if you're in a small town now, the world is at your doorstep.
That is true.
Let's take a minute to thank our sponsors and then come back and play 5 quick questions. What's the hottest trend in gardening? I think the hottest trend is aquaponics. Can you really grow a massive garden powered by fish? Find out more and discover the secrets to building your own fish-powered garden at www.backtomygarden.com/fish. It's finally here. 99 remarkably clever gardening ideas that you can use immediately. It's a free report. You get instant access. It's an epic list of tips, hacks, and gardening shortcuts. Go to www.backtomygarden.com/clever. I was just glancing at the clock and our time is whipping by. And now's the time in the show where we play a game called 5 Quick Questions. Okay. This is your chance to share your wisdom and experience with rookie novice gardeners. Are you ready to play, Andrea?
I sure am.
All right, question number 1. What's the strangest or funniest mistake that you've ever made in the garden that you're willing to admit to publicly?
Strangest mistake I've ever made. Well, I don't know if this is strange, but I tried this plant out that they had at the garden center. It's called Pieris japonica, and it's a broadleaf evergreen, and it's kind of like a holly is or an azalea. And it has these beautiful bell-shaped flowers, and it claimed on the tag that it was zone 5. I don't think it was telling the truth because I tried it 2 years in a row, and it said it was a shade plant, so I put it in a shady area, and I followed the directions on the tag about how it needed peat moss and loam and all this. And did not survive the winter, would do fine all summer, and then just die in the winter. Both times I've tried it. So beware the plant tags. Maybe double check them on the internet or something, or some other source like Dave's Garden before you try them, because I think that one was maybe actually zone 6.
Wow, good advice. That's fantastic. I mean, I'm sorry that your plant died 2 winters in a row, but I bet you a lot of people make the same mistake.
I would think so. I think they're pushing the limits of the zones on some of these. So, or maybe if you had a microclimate that was warmer, somewhere near a warm, parking lot or something, maybe it would have survived then. But did not work under the oak tree against the house.
Wow, and usually the house is, well, I guess it depends if it's sunny. You said it was shady.
Well, it was the north side, so maybe it was too cold.
Yeah, the old north wind right off of Michigan. That'll do it. Yep. Well, that was really good advice. Question 2. What's something you're good at in the garden? What's a skill that you possess that is either really useful or you're proud of?
I don't think I have a particular skill. Like I'm not a grafter or a seed starter or anything like that. I think what generally grow best for me are herbs and flowers, I guess. Mm-hmm. I can usually get those to survive pretty well.
Oh, speaking of herbs, my little tomato garden there under the grow light, I just planted slow bolt cilantro.
Oh, yeah.
And we'll see if it can, can it grow in January under a light? We'll find out. We use so much of it, in salsa and tomato sauce. It's like our go-to herb around here.
Yeah, it's good stuff. That often bolts on me. I try to harvest as much as I can in the spring before it does.
Yeah,
stuff.
I mean, if it's same with lettuces, like if it says slow bolt, it instantly has my attention.
Yep. I'll have to look for that.
Question 3. You've already answered part of question 3, is a couple of good websites to share with beginning gardeners. You mentioned Local Kitchen Blog and Ball Canning and Dave's Garden. Do you have any others?
Mm-hmm. I like Mother Earth News.
Mm-hmm.
And Margaret Roach's blog.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a couple others. Michigan Backyard Gardener, it's a blog. And there's Michigan Garden Club, which is kind of like a garden chat site. So you can talk to other gardeners in Michigan.
Wow, nice. Give me that last one again, Michigan
Garden Club.
Garden Club. I'll look them up, give them a link. I guess Michigan is what, zone 4 and 5?
I think it's everything from 3 to 5.
Right, it's got to be 3 up near the top there.
Peninsula.
Yeah.
Yeah, the Upper Peninsula by, like Isle Royal and all that has to be zone 3. It's very cold.
If
Even
the winter doesn't get it,
there once.
The deers will eat it.
It's true.
Wow, that's a lot of websites. That's excellent. Question 4. Do you have a favorite gardening book?
I like Amy Stewart's book. I read her book, Wicked Plants, and that's actually good for sit down and read type reading, not just a reference. She has a couple other ones called Wicked Bugs and The Drunken Botanist and Flower Confidential. But they're all good reads. And the one I like for reference the most is Bill Mollison has a book called Permaculture Design, which I should give a disclaimer here. I'm not really a permaculture person because I'm not trying to, do a large amount of food production, but there are principles you can use from permaculture on a smaller scale, like using guilds and companion plants and things like that, and planting things closer together that are very helpful. I think it'd be most helpful to somebody who's doing like a hobby farm type situation.
Nice. Oh, as an aside, I noticed on your Twitter feed that you're getting involved in the Master Gardener program. Do you want to mention that?
Yes. Michigan State University was the first university in our country to be an agricultural university, and they had a land grant back in Abraham Lincoln's day, so they got some land and they started things up. And then over time, they started working with the Department of Agriculture, and I think there's universities in nearly every state that do this now, and they have extension services, and they run things like the 4-H program that teaches kids about animals, and a whole bunch of programs and pamphlets and information for farmers and people who do animal husbandry. And one of their programs is the Master Gardener program, which I guess they have here in the United States. They're in Canada, where you are, Dave, and also in South Korea, interestingly enough. So if you're in any of those countries, you can take this course, and basically they teach you about gardening so that you can go out and do volunteer work with the community and teach other people about gardening. It's not a master's degree. It's not a college course. You don't need prerequisite college education to do it. You can just be anybody and take the course and learn more about gardening. So I had my first class last night on basically the water systems and how to take care of the waterways. So.
Outstanding. An organization that all they do is help promote the message of gardening, you know. How can you not fall in love with that idea?
Well, I love it. So I hope other people will too.
Enjoy it. Have fun with it. Question 5. It's a fun one, Andrea. No right or wrong answer. Is there anything that you've never grown that you would love to experiment with in your garden?
I think, well, next year I want to, there's a wall that goes down to our lake, and I'd like to grow vines over there. And one of the vines I'd like to try are these Northern Kiwis. I have never tried them. I don't know if they'll actually survive, but they're not like the kiwis you get in the grocery store. They're much smaller and less fuzzy, but they sound interesting, and it might be nice to have a vine like that covering the seawall.
The Northern Kiwi Vine Experiment. I love it. And listeners, if you're curious, make sure you go to Andrea's blog. Give it a couple of months, depending on when you listen to this interview, and she'll post some photos of how it's going. You can connect with Andrea on social media, Twitter, at ALHRAMANDREA. I'll have that up on the blog at BackToMyGarden. Check out Andrea's blog at www.milakehomegarden.blogspot.com. I almost said lake house, but it's lake home, right?
Yes.
Excellent. I'll have links up on that as well. Andrea, the time has flown by. You've been a brilliant guest.
Thank you.
I want to give you the chance today to have the last word to the listeners all over the world. Can you leave us with either a note of encouragement or a pearl of wisdom?
Not sure I have much wisdom, but encouragement is every garden's different and every person's different. And I know a lot of people out there take yoga classes. If you've ever taken a yoga class, they always tell you to go at your own pace and do what's right for you in the moment. I think you have to do that with gardens. You have to go with what the weather pattern is, go with what the plant needs at that moment, and go also with what you are able to do. If all you can do is plant one little plant in a pot that year, that's okay. If you want to revamp your whole yard, that's okay too. You don't have to feel pressured to do either one. Just go at your own pace, have fun with it, and know that the plant is on your side. It wants to live, so you can help it live, and everything will turn out as it should.
Wow, Andrea, that's brilliant. Well done. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you very much for having me.